to another episode of Under the Spotlight, where we take important figures from in and around Manchester and put them under the spotlight. Today, I'm joined with Ms. Banji Adewumi as the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Director at the University of Manchester. Your second mayoral term is ending in 2024. After being in this role since, what's now 5 years, since 2017, what's next for Andy Burnham?
Well, a third term is what I'm getting ready for. You know, the first term I was really focused on homelessness, and we made a big change there. We set up a scheme called A Bed Every Night, and that's running now, and it's really made a difference. This term is very much about buses and integrating buses with the trams. The third term would be to bring trains into the B network, and then to really build out the London transport system, London-style transport system. So, I mean, I'm really excited the way the city's developing. To be honest,
what is the SU going to do to help the students during this time?
So the Students' Union Advice Centre is what I'd say should be people's first port of call. They're open from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. from Monday to Friday, except on Thursdays when they're open 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. And they are specialised in dealing with academic inquiries. So if you're finding that your studies are being impacted by strikes significantly, if you need to look at submitting a mitigating circumstances request, or if you need any help making an appeal, then the Advice Centre is there for you. Please come chat to us in the office at any time as well. We're always, we're all ears here. We're also doing teach outs today, tomorrow, and on Wednesday next week during the last day of strikes. So come along, chat to your lecturers who are striking, find out about the history of industrial action here at the university. But by all means, come chat to me, message me on Instagram, drop me an email. Always happy to hear.
The Zen strikes currently are being talked about in the university accommodation. But as you said, that rent has been rising all over Manchester. And a lot of students live in your constituency, in Fallowfield and in Rusholme. So they're still having to face the cost of living crisis, but they can't rent strike because they have a relationship with the tenant. What do you think should be done, or what can you do in the Houses of Parliament to change this and to make it much more affordable for students?
Well, look, I am elected to represent the people, and that includes rightly what you said. There are many students here too. So my job is to be the voice for them, and my job is to do what I can to improve things. And I understand the challenges many young people are actually going through. And this whole idea of cost implication when you're a student and the consequences for many decades, even when they finish being students. So whatever can be done, I will do my best to promote that, to make things better for the students.
So you guys have been quite involved in reporting for the Mancunian about the switch to the new roles for this year's elections. So can you explain briefly which roles have changed and why you think this is important?
So from what we understand is that earlier in the year, during November, when the part-time officer elections were taking place, there was a referendum that went down about changing the exec roles. And those changes have been made to the way it was. And notable changes are that there's no longer an international officer, and that international officer has gone, the responsibilities of that post have gone to the activities and culture officer. Meanwhile, even the women's officer has been, there's no longer a women's officer role, and it's under well-being and liberation. And the education officer has now been split into 3 different faculty officer roles, one for each different faculty. Welcome to the final day of candidate question times for the 2022 Manchester Student Union elections, hosted by the Manchester Media Group, the UOM student media platform. I'm Shekhar Talwar, co-news editor for the Mancunian. This week, we've been running candidate hustings for 8 full-time executive officer roles. Last night, we heard from candidates from Wellbeing and Liberation, Science and Engineering, and Research officers. The exec officers are the top tier of the union student roles. They have full-time jobs paid £20,403 for the year to represent all students and influence their experience throughout university. These live streams are a chance for you to meet the candidates for each role and hear them answer questions on topics suggested by Manchester students. Last year, we spoke to a popular student bar in 256 about the spiking epidemic.
Yes.
And we were told by the owner of the bar that they had talked to GMP multiple times about trying to improve security in the area, but the GMP never got back to them. Why aren't GMP listening to nightlife industry and who are trying to make a positive change?
Myself and Sasha Lord came here to the university actually to talk to students who'd organised a big protest in the city centre. And we set up an anti-spiking partnership, working with a number of bars and with GMP, where we were looking at getting testing kits available on the spot, so that if somebody felt they'd been spiked, they could immediately get access to that. And we were asking the clubs and the bars to do more to help people who may feel they needed time out if they felt unwell.
The report used the term BAME constantly,
Right.
and then shortened it to BME a few times as well.
Yes.
But it's many times been argued that it's quite a harmful term to use. It's just segregating people who are are not white as one category.
Yes.
So my question is, isn't using this term and talking about inclusive practices a bit hypocritical on the same?
May I ask what course you're studying?
History and politics.
Right, yo. Excuse my expression. So, indeed, quite a very good question. And you are right. And you share the feelings of many in terms of why put people into boxes. I'm going to go back a bit to go forward. So there's something about benchmarking, and there's something about us being a public sector organization, which means we have a public sector equality duty, which means we need to report on the breakdown of our staff, the breakdown of our students, the breakdown of even including those we engage with under the banner of what's called the protected characteristics as described by the Equality Act 2010.
The same owner also told us that they were trying to contact the council to increase night transport around Fallowfield because they were getting infrequent buses and students couldn't get back home in time if there was any sort of danger. How are you working to make sure that student areas are safer in this way?
Yeah, so the problem with the buses at the moment is that we don't control the buses, so they can decide what services they run, and that's the big reason why buses here need to change. So I have taken the decision to put buses under public control, and so for anyone who arrives at the university now in their first year, they will basically be here while the whole of our city becomes regulated.
It seems like everyone is suffering due to the cost of living, due to institutions that have been there for a long time and that raise their prices. What do you think is the point when these strikes will have to stop and finally a solution will be there so that the strikes stop?
I think the problem ultimately is there's so many families who are experiencing these difficulties, and it's almost like a triple whammy being done there to the family budget. And therefore, we as public figures and the government in particular needs to look at this and see what they can do.
Between Sophie and Robbie, you'd see that they were like very different types of ways to get voting done, where I think Sophie would find sort of be more traditional, where she's just gone out there and her Instagram is filled up with her manifesto, her key points, and everything she's going to do. She's gone out, reached to people. She had the Feminist Collective endorsing her, which was Feminist Collective have about 2,000 followers.
Now 20,000. 20 is the
Sorry.
big ones.
Yep. So 20,000 followers. So that's huge. And that's how, I guess, Sophie went up. And Robbie, on the other hand, went and I think almost put all his £50 of campaigning money into just posters, and he put it up all over the place. He can go all the way down to Withington, and on bus stops you'll see his posters in his face, and he came and bombarded every lecture and just said, vote for me. And I think that's one of the things that Robbie did that was different from Sophie, that Robbie consistently put himself out there, consistently showed his face.
How will you
to
make
everyone.
sure that events are inclusive to students with disabilities, those who don't drink, commute, or community university, and more? So this will start with Robbie.
So this academic year, Sid, one of our disability officers, has made it compulsory for all societies to publish accessibility information with all of their events, which I think is fantastic.
Like you mentioned, in the strategy itself, the first priority was the inclusive environment. But within that priority, it mentioned reducing the pay gap for staff members. Now, the University and College Union has been consistently striking on this matter because the current pay gap the mean pay gap stays at 15.6% for gender and 13.3% for ethnicity. So although this has reduced over the past few years, the staff are still not happy. So what is the EDI's plan on how to reduce this?
Yeah. So I join colleagues who are not happy with the gap, and you are right, the gap has been there for a number of years, but you are also right to point out that the gap has been reducing. And I guess the challenge we have is to reduce it at pace.